What does it sound like when a century of pride is sold for a bucket of neon pink paint? Look at the screen. Look at the eyes of those models. Do you see a car? Do you see the curves of a predator ready to pounce? No. You see a funeral. You see the cold and calculated assassination of a 102-year-old British icon. Welcome back to the strategic lens of Sammy. Today we are not just analyzing a business pivot. We are witnessing a tragedy in 3 acts. I want you to travel back with me for a moment to the year 1961. The world was changing, and Jaguar was the king of the change. When the E-Type rolled onto the stage at the Geneva Motor Show, it was not just a machine. It was a declaration of dominance. It was so perfect that even the great Enzo Ferrari had to bow his head and call it the most beautiful car ever made. It was the roar of a predator that owned the dreams of every driver in America and the streets of every city on Earth. But look at the Jaguar of today. The roar has been silenced. The leaping cat has been decapitated and replaced by a clinical and soulless wordmark that feels like it belongs on a luxury detergent box. When Elon Musk asked the world if Jaguar even sells cars anymore, he was not just trolling. He was delivering the final blow to a brand that has lost its way in the neon fog. Sammy is here to tell you that this is the most devastating act of corporate self-immolation in the history of the modern industrial age. Jaguar has decided to burn every bridge. They have decided to spit on their own heritage. They have decided to tell their loyal customers that their memories are a burden that must be discarded. This is the scorched earth policy of the elite. They call it exuberant modernism. Sammy calls it a billion-dollar suicide note. Why would a titan of industry, with a legacy that survived world wars and economic depressions, decide to vanish into thin air? Why would they choose to stop selling cars for 2 whole years and expect the market to wait for them? We are going deeper than the glossy advertisements. We are looking into the dark corners of the boardroom at JLR. We are analyzing the mechanism of the Firebreak and the terrifying truth behind the number 49. This is a high-intensity interrogation of a brand that has forgotten how to hunt. This is the story of how Jaguar became a ghost while still breathing. Buckle up because the air is about to get thin. The wheel of destiny is turning, and for Jaguar it is heading straight for the rocks. In the world of strategic warfare, we have a term for what Jaguar is doing to its own infrastructure. It is called the Firebreak. In a forest fire, you intentionally burn a strip of land to stop the flames from advancing. But in the world of high finance, Jaguar is burning the entire mountain and hoping that a pink garden will bloom in the radioactive ashes. Think about the sheer insanity of this maneuver. Jaguar has officially stopped production of every single internal combustion vehicle in its global lineup. The F-Type, which carried the soul of the racing legends, is dead. The XE and the XF, which once stood tall as the sophisticated alternatives to the German giants, are gone. Even the award-winning I-Pace, the car that was supposed to prove Jaguar could lead the electric revolution, has been executed. In the States and across Europe, showrooms that once smelled of expensive leather and raw power are now nothing more than empty mausoleums. From a strategic standpoint, this creates a total and lethal vacuum. Most luxury manufacturers understand the fundamental law of continuity. You build a bridge. You create hybrids. You keep the legacy models alive to fund the future. But Jaguar has chosen to ninthur for 2 whole years. They have effectively fired their own customers. Imagine being a dealership owner in America who has spent decades and millions of dollars building the Jaguar name in your community. You wake up one morning and the corporate office tells you that you have nothing to sell for the next 24 months. Jaguar has slashed its dealership network from over 120 locations in America down to a tiny handful of flagship boutiques. They are abandoning the heartland to focus on a few elite bubbles of wealth. This is not just a gap in the product line. This is a massive and irreversible hemorrhage on the balance sheet. In the world of premium retail, if you are not visible, you do not exist. While Jaguar sits in this self-imposed exile, their rivals are feasting on the remains. Porsche is doubling down on the Taycan. Mercedes and BMW are refining their luxury EVs to perfection. Even the newcomers like Lucid and Rivian are moving in to take the space that Jaguar so arrogantly vacated. Jaguar has stepped out of the race and they expect the world to stop and wait while they reinvent the wheel. Sammy asks you to consider the psychology of the high-end buyer. Brand loyalty is not a suicide pact. It is a relationship of trust. By creating this 2-year silence, Jaguar is gambling that their name still has enough residual magic to pull people back from the arms of Bentley and Aston Martin in the year 2026. It is a bet made with other people's money, and it is one that defies every law of commercial logic. They are not just crossing a bridge. They are jumping into the abyss and hoping that the parachute will open before they hit the ground. Let us talk about the marketing campaign that set the internet on fire for all the wrong reasons. The copy nothing era. When the creative team at Jaguar released that 30-second manifesto, they thought they were being revolutionary. They thought they were ushering in a new age of exuberant modernism that would redefine the very concept of luxury. What they actually did was trigger a guillotine that severed their head from their body. The imagery was a sensory assault of neon yellows and abrasive pinks, models in strange and shapeless clothing wielding sledgehammers and staring blankly into the camera as if they were disgusted by the person watching. No cars were shown, no mention of engineering, no hint of the speed or the elegance that made Jaguar the pride of the British Empire. For a brand built on the sweat of Le Mans and the refinement of royalty, this was not an evolution. It was a calculated act of desecration. The backlash in the States was a tidal wave of rejection that moved faster than any car Jaguar currently has for sale. On social media, the comments reached a level of intensity that would melt steel. Over 160 million views, and a staggering 93% of the sentiment was negative. People were not just confused. They were viscerally offended. They felt that a piece of their cultural history was being sold out for a woke mirage that prioritized social signaling over the actual quality of the product. Jaguar tried to frame this as being bold and courageous, but Sammy sees it as a catastrophic failure of basic human psychology. When you own a brand like Jaguar, you are selling a dream of power and poise. You are selling the feeling of being the predator. By replacing that with a non-binary aesthetic that refuses to acknowledge the car itself, Jaguar committed the ultimate sin of luxury marketing. They became unrecognizable to the very people who have the $100,000 required to buy their cars. This is the Bud Light moment of the automotive world, but with stakes that are exponentially higher. A beer is an impulse buy that can be forgotten in a week. A Jaguar is a life choice. If you destroy the identity, you destroy the value of the asset. They wanted to shock the world and they succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. But they forgot that shock is only valuable if it leads to a sale. Instead, they created a wall of static that has blocked out the very history they spent a century building. They have decapitated their own legacy, and now they are surprised that the market is treating them like a corpse. If you want to see the real obituary of the Jaguar brand, you do not look at the colorful fashion ads. You look at the cold and heartless spreadsheets in the basement of the JLR headquarters. The number 49 is a ghost that will haunt this company for as long as it exists. In the month of April 2025, across the entire continent of Europe, one of the most famous car brands in human history sold exactly 49 vehicles. Let that sink in for a moment. 49 cars for a population of hundreds of millions. That is not a sales figure. That is a rounding error. That is the sound of a company flatlining in the middle of a global crisis. To put that in perspective, a single used car lot in a small town in America might move more inventory than that on a slow weekend. This represents a 97.5% collapse in sales volume. It is a mathematical execution. The executives at Jaguar tried to spin this as a planned result of their transition. They claimed that because they stopped manufacturing the old models, they expected the numbers to fall. But this is where the strategic lens of Sammy sees the lie. If you knew the numbers were going to hit zero, why would you choose that exact moment to launch a global rebranding campaign that made the world hate you? Why would you spend tens of millions of dollars on a media blitz when you had nothing to put in the driveway of a customer? This is the architecture of a total collapse. In the high-stakes world of corporate finance, you cannot survive a 2-year gap in revenue without a massive safety net. Jaguar is leaning entirely on the success of Land Rover to keep the lights on. Land Rover is the fortress. The Defender and the Range Rover are the cash cows that are funding this midlife crisis for the Jaguar brand. But how long will the board of directors allow Jaguar to bleed? Jaguar now makes up less than 8% of the total group volume. It has become a parasite on the success of its brother. When a brand loses its pulse in the data, the market begins to treat it as a memory. The United States is a market that rewards momentum and punishes hesitation with death. Once you lose that momentum, it is almost impossible to get it back. The number 49 is not just a statistic. It is a death sentence written in black ink on a corporate ledger. It is the proof that the Firebreak strategy might have turned into a forest fire that cannot be stopped. Why would they do this? To understand the why, you have to look into the hearts and the egos of the architects who designed this disaster. This is a story of elite arrogance that has lost all connection to the ground. It is the belief that if you are loud enough and strange enough, the world will eventually bow to your vision out of sheer confusion. The leaders at Jaguar, including the former creative director, Jerry McGovern, believed that the old Jaguar was a burden. They saw the wood grain and the leather and the racing stripes as chains that kept them from a futuristic utopia. They wanted to create something that existed in a vacuum. Copy nothing. It sounds poetic and deep in a boardroom in London, but in the real world of the American consumer, it is a recipe for absolute disaster. Everything is a copy of something. Every brand is a continuation of a story. When you tell your customers that you are copying nothing, you are effectively telling them that their memories and their loyalty mean absolutely nothing to you. This is the philosophy of the blank slate, and it is a dangerous game to play with a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. They looked at the success of Tesla, and they thought they could replicate the cult of personality without actually having a personality. They looked at the fashion world and thought they could sell cars like they sell $5,000 handbags. But a car is a kinetic sculpture. It is a machine that must perform and provide a visceral experience. By focusing entirely on the exuberant modernism of the brand, they forgot that they were supposed to be building a vehicle that people actually want to drive. This arrogance led them to shut down the showrooms in the middle of a transition. It led them to fire the agencies that dared to question the vision. It led them to ignore the data that showed the world was moving toward hybrid luxury rather than pure electric isolation. Jaguar decided they knew better than the market. They decided that they would dictate the future to the consumer. But the market is a cruel and unforgiving teacher. It does not care about your artistic vision. It only cares about value, and right now Jaguar has destroyed its value in pursuit of a massive ego trip. The Wheel of Destiny does not care about your slogans. It only cares about the friction between the tire and the road, and Jaguar has completely lost its grip. When the tower begins to lean, the people at the top are always the first to be pushed. We are now witnessing the total decapitation of the Jaguar leadership. This is the part of the story where the corporate thriller turns into a tragedy. The departure of CEO Adrian Mardell was the first signal that the ship was taking on water faster than the pumps could handle. You do not retire in the middle of a global transformation, unless the transformation is hitting a brick wall. Then came the fall of Jerry McGovern. For over 2 decades, he was the undisputed king of design at JLR. He was the man who gave us the Evoque and the new Defender. He was considered untouchable. But the Jaguar rebranding was his Icarus moment. He flew too close to the sun of his own ego, and the wings melted under the heat of public rejection. The reports that he was escorted from the building are the final exclamation point on a failed era. Even the marketing partners are being purged in a desperate attempt to find a scapegoat for the mess. Accenture Song, the massive agency behind the neon nightmare, saw their contract shredded as Jaguar tries to pivot away from the damage they caused. When a company starts firing its architects and its builders at the same time, it is a public admission that the blueprints were flawed from the very first day. While the Jaguar side of the office is in flames, the Land Rover side remains a fortress of gold. The Defender sold over 115,000 units. The profit margins are at record highs. This creates a massive and dangerous internal tension within the company. How much longer will the Land Rover engineers and executives watch their hard-earned profits be thrown into the furnace of the Jaguar experiment? In the boardroom of JLR, there is a silent war happening. It is a war between the pragmatists, who want to build cars that people in America actually want to buy, and the visionaries who want to build a brand that no one can afford to buy into. The fall of the architects is the beginning of the end for the reimagined strategy. It is the moment when the reality of the balance sheet finally catches up to the fantasy of the marketing deck. The elite are falling, and they are leaving behind a brand that is shattered, confused, and gasping for air. So here we stand at the edge of the abyss, looking toward the year 2026. The Wheel of Destiny is turning, and it is heading toward a final confrontation with reality. Jaguar promises us a 4-door electric GT with a range of 500 miles and a price tag that starts at $130,000. They say it will be the most beautiful thing the world has seen since the E-Type. But Sammy wants to ask you one final and devastating question. Does it even matter anymore? By the time that car hits the showroom floors in the States, the brand will have been silent for 2 whole years. The dealerships will be gone. The history will be erased. The leaping cat will be a memory in a dusty garage. We are seeing a massive cooling of the electric vehicle market across the globe. The early adopters have already bought their cars. The mass market is hesitant. And the ultra-wealthy are looking for heritage and soul and authenticity, things that Jaguar has intentionally thrown into the trash. They are entering a market that is crowded with giants like Porsche, and they are doing it with a brand that has become a punchline on the internet. The tragedy of Jaguar is that it was entirely avoidable. They could have been the British alternative to Porsche. They could have built high-performance hybrids that bridge the gap to the future. They could have kept the roar of the engine while embracing the spark of the motor. Instead, they chose the scorched earth. They chose to commit commercial suicide and call it a rebirth. As we look at the wreckage of this 102-year-old empire, we see a warning for every business in the world. Never forget who you are. Never forget who your customers are. And never assume that you are bigger than the story that made you successful in the first place. Jaguar has made its bet. They have burned the boats. They have jumped from the cliff. We are all just waiting to see if they find their wings or if they hit the rocks of reality with a terminal thud. Thank you for joining Sammy on this journey through the heart of a crisis. Keep your eyes on the numbers and your head out of the neon clouds, because the data is the only truth in a world of marketing lies. I will see you at the next turn of the wheel.